In the spring of 1963, in Maranello, Italy, two of the most powerful men in the automotive world were about to close a deal that would change history.
On one side, the executives of Ford Motor Company, an industrial giant that produced a car every 30 seconds. On the other, Enzo Ferrari, a solitary patriarch who built race cars with the soul of an artist. Ford was going to buy Ferrari, merging American might with Italian mystique. But then, at the last moment, with the contracts on the table, Enzo Ferrari stopped. He pointed to a clause, one that stripped him of total control over his racing team, and stood up. What he said next not only blew up the deal, it ignited a war. This isn't just the story of a race. It's the story of how a personal insult between two men unleashed one of the most brutal and expensive corporate and engineering battles ever seen. It is the story of how an industrialist's ego, almost as large as his empire, clashed with the pride of an artisan who valued victory above all else. To understand how this rivalry came to cost millions of dollars and, tragically, several lives, we must answer a central question. How is it possible that a simple failed agreement turned into an all-out war for the soul of motorsport? In the early 1960s, Ford Motor Company had a problem. Despite being an industrial colossus, its image was boring. Its cars were seen as reliable, practical, and the choice of grandfathers. Meanwhile, the baby boom generation was coming of age, and they didn't want their parents' cars. They wanted speed, style, excitement. Ford was losing the battle for the hearts and minds of the youth. Under the leadership of Henry Ford II, grandson of the legendary founder, the company launched an ambitious campaign called Total Performance. The idea was simple: dominate all forms of automotive competition, NASCAR, Indy, drag racing, to prove that Ford was synonymous with victory. But they were missing the jewel in the crown, the most prestigious and global arena of all, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Le Mans wasn't just a race. It was a mythical test of endurance and speed that captivated the world. And for years, Le Mans had only one king, Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari's red machines were the embodiment of speed, beauty, and exclusivity. Winning at Le Mans was the ultimate validation. For Ford executives, the solution seemed obvious and elegant. If you can't beat them, buy them. Acquiring Ferrari would not only give them an instant win at Le Mans, but would provide them, overnight, with the prestige and high-performance DNA they so craved. Thus began months of negotiations. Ford spent millions of dollars on audits, and an army of lawyers descended upon the small Ferrari factory in Maranello. It seemed the deal was done. Ford would pay $18 million, an astronomical sum at the time, for control of the company. Enzo, who was no longer young, would secure the future of his legacy. But Enzo Ferrari was not just any businessman. He was Il Commendatore, the commander, and his racing team, the Scuderia Ferrari, was more than a department. It was an extension of his own soul. When he read the final clause, which stipulated that Ford would have final approval over the racing budget, he realized he wouldn't be selling his company, but surrendering it. According to legend, his response was volcanic. Not only did he reject the deal, but he supposedly launched a series of calculated insults, telling the Ford men that they couldn't build high-performance cars, and that Henry Ford II was not worthy of being compared to his grandfather. When the news reached Henry Ford II in Detroit, the humiliation was total. He hadn't just failed in his attempt to buy Ferrari, he had been personally insulted. In that moment, the mission changed. It was no longer about buying Ferrari. It was about burying him. It is said that Ford met with his top engineers and gave them a simple and direct order: go to Le Mans and crush Ferrari. Money would be no object. Ford created a new division, Ford Advanced Vehicles, in the UK, and assembled a dream team of engineers, including Eric Broadley, whose Lola MK6 race car became the foundation for the new project. The goal was to create a Ferrari killer. The car was named the Ford GT40, a name referencing its height of only 40 inches. On paper, it was a revolutionary machine. It had an advanced monocoque chassis and was powered by a potent Ford V8 engine. But Le Mans is not one on paper. In 1964, the GT40s arrived at Le Mans with all the fanfare in the world. They were incredibly fast on the straights, but aerodynamically unstable and mechanically fragile. None of the three cars managed to finish the race. Ferrari won again. In 1965, Ford returned with even more money and an even bigger team. The result was an even greater humiliation. The 6 GT40s that competed broke down, one after another. Ferrari not only won, but swept the podium, achieving a humiliating 1-2-3 finish. The giant of Detroit had been defeated twice by the Italian artisan. The press mocked them. The project seemed like a colossal and expensive failure. Henry Ford II was furious. He realized that industrial muscle and money were not enough. They needed a different kind of genius. They needed someone who understood the language of speed, someone who wasn't a corporate executive, but a racer at heart. And in America, there was only one man for that job: Carroll Shelby. Shelby was a legend, a former driver who had won Le Mans in 1959 and was now building the fearsome AC Cobras, cars that combined lightweight British chassis with the brute force of Ford V8 engines. Shelby was a maverick, a visionary who knew how to win. Along with him, he brought his test driver and friend, Ken Miles, a brilliant engineer and a fiercely talented driver, albeit with a difficult temperament. When Shelby and Miles took charge of the GT40 program, their diagnosis was immediate. The car had been designed by a committee of engineers who didn't understand racing. It was unstable, unreliable, and dangerous. Their solution was not subtle. They decided to ditch the original engine and force in a beast, the monstrous 7.0-liter V8 engine from the Ford Galaxy NASCAR. Taming this new creation, the GT40 Mark II, was a Herculean task. The car was so powerful, it shredded brakes and gearboxes. Ken Miles spent countless hours testing, adjusting, and perfecting the machine on the track, often risking his life. His work was crucial. He transformed a failed prototype into a racing weapon. Meanwhile, Ferrari, confident in his dominance, had barely evolved his car, the 330 P3. Enzo Ferrari underestimated the determination and fury of his American rival. It was a fatal mistake. In June of 1966, the Le Mans circus prepared for the final battle. Ford arrived with an army. They deployed 8 GT40 Mark IIs, backed by a legion of engineers, and a budget that eclipsed the rest of the grid combined. Ferrari arrived as the defending champion, with his elegant and proven P3s. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. The race began, and it was brutal. The Fords, with their immense power, dominated the long Mulsanne Straight, reaching speeds of over 210 miles per hour. The Ferraris were more agile in the corners, but the relentless speed of the GT40s began to wear them down. One by one, the red cars from Maranello began to succumb to mechanical issues. The pace set by Ford was simply too much for them. By dawn, the war was almost over. The last Ferrari retired. Ford was on track not only to win, but to achieve the same humiliation Ferrari had inflicted upon them the year before, a 1-2-3 finish. With victory secured, Ford executives made a decision that would become infamous. To get a perfect publicity photo, they ordered their 3 leading cars to cross the finish line together. Ken Miles, who was leading the race comfortably after doing all the development work, received the order to slow down to allow the other 2 Fords to catch up. He obeyed, but race officials ruled that because the car of Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon had started further back on the grid, it had covered more distance in 24 hours. Officially, they were the winners. In an instant of corporate arrogance, Ken Miles was robbed of the victory he so richly deserved. It was a bittersweet win, tainted by a marketing decision. Ford had achieved its goal. They had crushed Ferrari at Le Mans. They would repeat the feat in 1967, 68, and 69. The war was over, and Detroit had won. But the legacy of this rivalry is much more complex than a simple victory. The Battle of Le Mans changed the industry forever. It proved that, with unlimited resources, an industrial giant could beat the specialists. It marked the beginning of the era of massive budgets in racing. For Ford, the victory solidified the total performance image, helping to sell millions of Mustangs and cementing its place in youth culture. For Ferrari, the defeat was a lesson in humility that finally led him to focus on Formula One, where his legend would continue to grow. Tragically, Ken Miles never had the chance to reclaim his victory. He died just 2 months after Le Mans, testing a new Ford prototype. He left as the unsung hero of this war, the man whose skill and bravery made Henry Ford II's revenge possible. The story of Ford versus Ferrari is a reminder that the greatest machines are often driven by the most basic human emotions: pride, ambition, and above all, revenge. It was born from an insult, fought with metal, and ended in legend. If you want to see that story, let me know in the comments and tell me, who do you think was the true winner of Le Mans '66? Ford or the legacy of Ken Miles? Thanks for joining us on this journey. This was Carjuiced.